First up tonight, let's welcome Matthew Lloyd and Ross Lane, and a big welcome back to Caroline Wilson, who has braved coming in tonight. She doesn't have COVID, but just back from overseas, laryngitis. Now, can I say, all those prayers that I had about Caroline having laryngitis, and tonight, the only night I want to hear from her, she's got it. But she can speak to us, and we'll get to it in a moment. Hold fire, Caro, until we get you, and we'll let you go in a few moments. Today, this book, a magnificent book. Eddie Betts, the boy from Boomerang Crescent. It's a long, hard road from the Nullarbor to the MCG. What a story this book has. But the chapter everybody went to first was about that camp that the Adelaide Crows had. Let's have a look at the quotes from the book. We had some weird sessions pop up. One consisted of us training while the Richmond club song blasted around Amy Park while we did a gruelling running session. That's, of course, after losing the grand final to Richmond. We knew about all that. Things were yelled at me that I had disclosed to the camp's counsellors about my upbringing. All the people present heard those things, or these things, Eddie Betts writes. Then we started an exercise that consisted of role-playing our responses to our partners. One of the responses suggested to us was, I feel like a better father and husband having come from this camp. That's what they should say when they got home. Next quote, among the really awful things he said was that I'd be a shit father as I was raised by only a mother. The camp ended by appropriating a First Nations people's ritual of a talking stick and attempting to apply it to all of us, even the non-Indigenous players and coaches. In my view, the talking stick was used incorrectly. I was not aware that any elder had given permission for it to be used either. Tonight on AFL 360 on Fox Footy, Eddie Betts had these things to say about the book and his time at that camp.
I told him everything, the way that I was feeling and how I was feeling, and I just felt like my voice wasn't being heard. And I felt like I needed justice. And I guess, you know, it did hurt at first when nothing was done.
Do you feel like they had enough information to take action, Eddie?
Yeah, I do. We told him everything. I told him everything. I know a lot of the other players told him everything, but it just, didn't feel like we were heard.
OK, we'll get to Caroline Wilson, who wrote the story. Sam McClure, of course, famously had his Quill Award withdrawn and legal action was taken against Sam McClure and Caroline Wilson. Today's book puts that into stark contrast. Anyway, let's move on. This is the grab today from Tim Silvers, who was not at the Adelaide Crows, but these days is their CEO.
What I read, I was actually saddened to read it. So, you know, people's welfare and well-being is paramount to our club, so I'm sorry to read it. Look, I've actually reached out to him this morning. Like I said before, I was saddened to read it, so I just reached out to him by text just to check in. My plan is to speak to him and Anna more formally towards the end of the week. I think we can move forward, but we'd like to say sorry to Eddie and anyone else that had a negative experience throughout the camp.
Club champion Mark Ricciuto was the football director at the time. He remains in that position. Here's what he had to say in Adelaide on Triple M this morning.
Look, it's sad to hear Eddie write that. Player welfare is always number one, no matter what's going on. You always want everyone to be happy and all that. So it's very sad that Eddie's written that, and I think the club's been on record at times to say that they acknowledge that it wasn't handled perfectly. So they've acknowledged that. But so it's sad to say, and, you know, we all love Eddie, and hopefully Eddie's getting over that. And, you know, that was 4 years ago. Certainly the club's moved on from that and looking towards the future and have made a lot of ground since back then. So, yep, it's come up in Eddie's book and that's fair enough. And as I said, hopefully Eddie's moving on as well and, you know, the club can move on and to bigger and better things.
Statements from the Players Association and the AFL in a moment for us to pick over. First, Caroline Wilson. Caro, thank you very much for coming in tonight in all seriousness. You've had a tough day and you've taken every concoction known to mankind to get right. What's your first response to what we've just seen and also to hearing the quotes from Eddie Betts' book?
Oh, well, it's obviously devastating. What Mark Ricciuto says is so inaccurate. Player welfare was not paramount. We all love Eddie. Things that happened on the camp were not perfect. How can you describe some of those allegations, or revelations, they're not allegations, as not perfect? They're horrifying. And we've moved on from that as a club. They've never moved on from it. The AFL will tell you that that's part of the problem. And don't get me started on the AFL. They knew all of this
I'm going to come back to you.
Nothing.
Hold fire on that for a second. Lloydie, let's go through a few of these things first of all. There's a statement today from South Australia, from WorkSafe South Australia, and then I'll get you to open up. Basically, Work South Australia said today they conducted a thorough investigation at the time in 2018. Allegations raised in the recent media reporting were considered in the investigation. Yep. So they did that. To the AFL, here's what the AFL had to say today. That's safe work. Let's roll through that. There's nothing new in that. That was continuation of their statement. But here's what the AFL had to say today. As a result of the investigation, the AFL made recommendations which were adopted on improved governance and compliance in relation to the protection of the players, officials and staff at the club, including further investment into the Adelaide Crows integrity area. Further, the investigation led to the introduction of an agreed AFL-approved process ahead of any club pre-season camp or activity that involves an external provider. Caro, let's go to what you have to say about the AFL.
It required discipline and a punishment. Now, the AFL is saying to me today they broke no rules. What about bringing the game into disrepute or conduct unbecoming? Surely what we've heard today from Eddie Betts is bringing the game into disrepute. How could they not take action? I just don't. I mean, I know they put measures in place, but that wasn't good enough for me.
Before I hear from Lloydie and from Ross, let's have a look at what the AFL Players Association, whose job is to look after the players. They said much of the information detailed in Eddie's book about the camp is new information to the AFLPA, and we are extremely concerned about the information on 3 levels. Firstly, the lack of psychological safety afforded to the entire playing group. Secondly, the cultural appropriation of Indigenous artefacts. And thirdly, the deliberate gathering of confidential information on players for the purpose of harmfully misusing that information. What we now believe is clear from our discussions with those players and the information contained in Eddie's book is that players felt pressured into remaining silent about the details of the camp. Paul Marsh, AFLPA CEO.
The thing that frustrates me, and you're shaking your head and Ross is scoffing listening to that, is it always gets to this point where it just explodes in a book like this to people to go, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're sorry if this was going on. And Tim Silver says his thing, the AFL Players Association come out. But Eddie said, I gave them everything. I gave them every single detail, yet it takes an explosion in the media and a book like this, Caro, for everyone to take it seriously.
As it did with the AFL and Adam Goods.
Yes.
As it did with the AFL and the Melbourne tanking. For how many years did they pretend there was nothing going on? It took Brock McLean on a TV show to reveal it. And with the PA, Ed, I spoke to Paul Marsh on countless occasions after interviewing Tex Walker in March 2018, and he admitted that there was Indigenous issues at the camp. And by the way, there were white footballers who also had terrible experiences. Paul Marsh, I repeatedly called him over an 18-month period. How he can say that he wasn't aware.
In good conscience,
I mean,
he can't make that statement.
I'm shocked by that more than anything.
So just to underline that, can you just put the graphic back up if we could? So you're saying that's inaccurate. You actually
Taylor
told him.
Walker, I went to his house in March 2018 and we talked about the camp, and he was, look, he liked the camp, but he talked about Indigenous concerns, and he said, I said to my teammates, let's get this Richmond game over and done with. We were playing, they were playing Richmond at the time, and then we'll deal with it. Now, I called Paul Marsh after that, and I said, you've got to talk to the Indigenous players. And then I rang him with other allegations. Terrible allegations from other players, and how he can say this now, why they get funded a lot of money. Surely their investigative resources are better than that.
So, Caro, can I play devil's advocate for a second? You've got WorkSafe South Australia, the AFLPA, the AFL and the club, who all love the players. They didn't send them there to hurt them, but obviously things have happened. Is it a case where, in these situations, and I defer to Ross and Lloydie on this as well, where sometimes people go to a movie and you like it, you hate it, you fell asleep and I was indifferent? Was it a situation particularly clearly for the appropriation of Indigenous artefacts and those sorts of things?
No, it was much
culturally
more than
insensitive.
That.
But
it was more than that.
I think the personal disclosure of information that is to a counsellor, and you make an assumption that private, that to be least
and
publicly
and
in the manner it was. I don't think it matters what colour your skin is. You'd be horrified by that.
Yeah.
I'm shocked by the AFL, Paul Marsh in particular, saying that's new information. And I hear investigative resources But something like this, as simple as the AFLPA CEO and whoever's senior getting on a plane, flying in. Eddie, as president of Collingwood, would walk down. A situation as serious as, and you would speak to the people on the ground. I find it staggering that he hasn't had a conversation with Eddie Betts.
You only have to look at the people who left the Adelaide Football Club at the end of 2018, at the end of 2019. The club, by the end of 2020, everyone was gone. Look at who left, and you know there are some Indigenous players there, but many others, and the coaches who left, including I think there was Tate Kazler and Josh Franco. They left in part because of what went on at the camp. Some coaches loved it, some were disgusted by it.
Well, we talk about punitive measures, but I think the damage is enough. Adelaide Football Club doesn't need any more than they lost a top-flight senior coach, they lost assistants, they lost top-flight players. The damage was done. I liked what Silver said today. It looked authentic and genuine to me. I think there's not owning it early enough, but 4 years on, I feel like Silver's owned that today. I don't like the AFLPA, it's new. But I think there's been enough damage done to the club.
I don't like the AFL. We knew all this, they didn't break any rules. How on earth can you not use your discretion?
Ross,
So Rory, can I ask you, Lordy, about Rory Sloane? You're going to throw to a grab in a second here, where he clearly was involved. He did drink the Kool-Aid.
But Ross says genuine. I just now question how genuine these comments are from Rory Sloane after we just saw Eddie Betts say, we were told to say once the camp ended.
I can speak about what I got out of it personally, absolutely. And I absolutely 100% came back from that camp feeling like a better husband, a better son, and a much better teammate than when I was before I left on that camp. So for me, the experience was unbelievable.
For me, though, to be told that, let's talk through what we'll say, what lines will be given.
I'm not prepared to say Rory Sloane is being influenced to say it.
What, even though Eddie Betts said we were
just
told to say it?
Just because Eddie says it doesn't mean that's why Rory said it.
He might have believed it, but he was told to say it.
My overall take, I can go back to the Essendon saga. Player groups, I know the group, McFarlane and Pavlich, if they were on that camp, they would have said, stop. So bad things happen when good people stay silent. And that's maybe the real issue. There wasn't enough strong leadership on the ground within that team, because strong leaders would stop that.
Just on that, I reckon though the players, I've been on some camps where at 4 in the morning I've had a big SOG bang on my window, so I had no idea it was coming. So in a situation like that, who's it explained to that, okay, we're going to have all the, open up to counsellors, you open up with the knowledge that we're going to bring that out.
Who
with
aren't qualified.
Can't qualify. Rope chain to you, you've got to get to a knife while all your teammates are abusing you. Surely that's explained to people within the football club, and whether you're head of footy...
Well, that would be senior coach, head of football.
Ed, can we hear from the president, Rob Chapman, in the months that followed the camp? Oh.
Hang on, we'll come back to it, Caro. That's Don Pike. We'll get that rolled up for you in a second. So we'll hear it's coming. Let's hear from Rob Chapman at the time.
Some of the stuff that I've heard out there, none of it is true. There's nothing that's gone on in that camp that I haven't attended on, business conferences and strategic days. What I believe went on the camp has been grossly over-exaggerated.
OK, so let's hear Don Pike. Come back, Caro, in a second. Let's hear Don Pike at the best and fairest.
In our drive to improve in our program, both in our physical and our mental side, in hindsight, seeking gains, maybe we pushed too far, and that I regret. The landscape we now operate in as an industry is more challenging than ever for players, administrators, boards, coaches, and this is leading to a wide range of issues around contentment. I hope that in the future we can find a better balance in how we view the game, regardless of result. Otherwise, I do fear for the people's genuine love of the game.
So he came pretty close to a significant apology at the BNF. Then in his resignation, he urged everyone in the game to be kinder and gentler and let people be content. Now, at the time, I felt that was so hypocritical. He allowed, after what he allowed at the camp, is this going to tarnish Don Pike's reputation going forward?
Well, I don't think it... Sorry,
can I put to you then the alternate view is that he learnt from the experience. He reflected on it, realised they overdid it, and we now need to be a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more.
I think he was referring to the fourth estate, among others, in that resignation speech.
And I think that's the real lesson. If it was he's talking about the football club and coaches not overreacting to results, because they had a super year and they got decimated by a dynasty team, but they overreacted themselves to instigate a camp like this, looking for that 1% edge. We can go through the history of supplements and mind. It's looking for the 1% where you can tip over and expose yourself in your club. That's the lesson out of this.
And Ross, you often wonder what comes next, and there might be another club.
Well, yeah, we talk about futurists and what's going to happen. They should be predicting what's the next threat for an AFL club. What rabbit hole could someone go down?
The Essendon players were used as lab rats. The Melbourne players were forced to play out of position, to deliberately lose. And I thought after those two, I never thought I'd see anything like this, and yet it's happened again.
Caro, and
so why would you, in good faith, as a mother or father,
hand your son on a
to
platter?
a footy club?
But it is that mentality.
And then the
of
AFL
war,
look at it and say they broke no rules.
It is that mentality, though. One in, single thoughts, go, and it is brainwashing. There's no doubt about it.